You're listening to the Career Interrupted podcast. This is your host, Joy Foster. Welcome to the show, Laura Harnett, the founder of Seep, S-E-E-P, which has recently been invested in by dragons Trinny, Woodall, and Deborah Meaden. Seep creates eco-friendly cleaning tools, and if you hang around on this podcast, we're even going to give you a way to get 20% off your first purchase. So, Laura, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. And of course, we're going to dive right in and we're going to talk about your career interruptions. So you've had 2 career interruptions. Tell us a little bit more about those.
So yeah, 2 interruptions. My first one was when I had my kids. So probably a lot of other women can associate with that. So I had a job which meant that I was traveling a lot. I was away from home. And when I had my husband didn't have a very flexible job. So I was a strategy consultant. And so then I had to change and get a job that was based much closer to home. So I then started working for Kingfisher, like not the beer, the part of the DIY group, slightly less exciting. So that was my first one. So it was just adjusting from a life on planes. And then my second one is probably something that women can sort of sympathize with, but it was, I was 39, my kids were 5 and 3. And I had that moment that most women dread, which is, I was in the shower and I found a lump in my breast. And at the time I was a sort of chief of staff at Selfridges. And yeah, I had 2 young kids diagnosed with breast cancer. And, what started then was 18 months of treatment. So chemo, radio, double mastectomy. And that created another interruption, right? Which is about what do you want to do with, if I'm lucky enough to get through this, what do I want to do with the rest of my career? So then I went back to Selfridges for a bit and then became an entrepreneur.
So what's really interesting is you ended up having a medically induced menopause as well because of the way that your cancer was treated. So you were thrust into menopause at the age of 39, really, which is also hugely disruptive. Anyone who's going through it in their 40s and 50s knows how disruptive it is, but to go through it at that early of an age would have been really challenging.
Yeah, at the time, just, I'd say in the last sort of 5 years, there's been a lot more understanding around menopause and the impact it can have on brain, everything. But it still was relatively, it was less talked about, I think, when I was going through it.
Yeah, absolutely. What were your biggest fears and doubts at that point? Because you had a huge job and, you had these 2 little children. There must have been some really serious fears and doubts creeping in.
Yeah, I think so. 2 big ones, really. One was, am I the same person? Am I still able to function in a big job, running big teams, making big decisions and board meetings? And I really was worried that after all of my treatment, that I just wouldn't have the strength, the sort of mental strength, the physical strength. I was kind of forever changed in a negative way, right? So I went back into Selfridges and then into a different job. And that was more for me to prove to myself that I still had it. I think the other big sort of doubt I had was, if I get through this, what if I don't make the most of it? And, I'd say I'd had a good career, but I wasn't necessarily, it didn't make my heart sing. And so that was the other fear, is I need to go back and do something different. And so the fear of, gosh, what is it? How do I make this count? Right.
Well, and it's just so much more when your life is on the line. That is so much more intense, than anything else. What surprised you about how it all worked out and what happened next?
So I left Selfridges, I went back, loved going back, felt like I could still do something. I didn't quite know what that was. I came from a really kind of traditional background. Like, we weren't entrepreneurs, and no one in my family was. I was always taught that, we have a safe job, pension. But actually, and I gave myself a bit of time, I tried some non-exec roles, that sort of thing. But I'd found this idea and I just couldn't get my head, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So, and the idea for Seep was, I'm pretty eco-conscious. I'd switched to lots of eco, sort of better for the planet, better for your body products, especially going through breast cancer. I just wanted no toxins in our house. I'd switched to eco-friendly kind of cleaning sprays, but actually I couldn't find tools. So when I say tools, it means like sponges and cloths. I couldn't find any that were plastic free. And so, why has nobody else done this? And so that's where Seep came from. And I think what surprised me was the fact that my brain went there and thought that this was like a legitimate career option, and that I had then I had the courage to do it, and I think ask me 10 years ago, would I have ever done it? And I would have said, there's no way. I'll support people, but never myself. So I think that was my biggest, I can take risks. And the bigger risks actually at the moment I take, like going on Dragon's Den, the better they seem to pan out. And I think the second thing I've learned is the surprise is that I'm actually good at it. And I never thought I would be either, right? Because you've got to be a kind of master of many, you've got to do a bit of everything. And I've always been sort of fairly sort of rigid. So yeah. I love it.
Well, you've talked about the Dragon's Den, so we have to just take a little side moment here. I really want to know, what was it like pitching to Trinny and Deborah, and what are they like? What has that experience been like for you?
It's absolutely the right thing to do for us as a brand. It's all about driving, like getting more brand visibility. So I really didn't want to do it, but I felt like I had to, right? I just had to get over the fear. And it is a pretty scary process. So, you have to go through lots and lots of kind of due diligence and sort of screen tests to get through. And then once you're through, you're there in a room for 7 or 8 hours waiting to go on set. There's no retakes and you don't get to see any edits. And so, I was there I knew I wanted Deborah and Trinny as dragons. And I knew that if I could get a deal from them and then accept it, I was more likely to get on TV, because then even if you record it, you're like not.
Oh, that's interesting. There's not a guarantee that you're going to be on TV,
because you're putting yourself through all this like roller coaster of emotions. Only, for then it to be pulled at the last minute would be pretty gutting, right? So yeah, and it's a really, really full on experience. Like I've done a lot of presenting, but I've never found myself in that sort of stressful situation, because anything you say could be aired. And yeah, and you don't want to, some people do end up, the edit doesn't look great, right? So it's pretty full on. And I think then the last bit was then actually waiting for it to be aired. I saw it at the same time as everyone did.
And okay, you didn't know what they were going to edit out and what they were going to.
I was in there for like 2 hours, so they picked out 8 minutes to show.
Oh, that's really interesting. Sort of the behind the scenes versus the reality. So it was a big process, and then actually what you see on TV is really
it's a very minor edit, and just think that they could have taken any bit of that, so there were some really stressful moments, there are good moments, and yeah,
but it's done now. You've got the investors and the investment. Yeah. Are they fun to work with? Are they just ridiculously good at what they do?
They're just they're ridiculously good. Like, I mean, they're both very different, which is why, both powerhouse women, which I think is amazing. Like, I love having sort of investors as women, and they're both good in different ways. So Trinny obviously has a huge audience. Her audience aligns pretty well to ours, has given us lots of opportunities already and more exciting ones to come. And then Deborah is just this sort of master networker and connector, super speedy. I send her a note and sort of, a few hours later, she's come back to me. So I feel unbelievably lucky to have them both on board.
That is so exciting. All right. So I want to know what you learned going through this process. Obviously, you're living a completely different life than you were expecting to live. So tell us what some of the lessons that came out of this have been.
You're never too old, and there's never a sort of an exact time when you should do these things. So, I think if I look back, it's like, the first 20 years of my career, I was learning, I was saving some money, and so for me, after going through all of my treatment, this is the time that made sense for me to be an entrepreneur. And then for other people, it's straight out of uni, or it's, like Trinny set up Trinny London, one of the fastest growing brands globally, like in her 50s. And so, and actually there's a lot of stats out there now about showing that, the older you get, the more likely you are to be successful because of your knowledge. So what I've learned is that it's never too late, and it's and actually brings huge energy to change things up a little bit and not just be doing the same thing year in, year out.
I love that. And is there a motto that you live by, or that guided you through all of this, or is guiding you now?
Yeah, I think there's lots of them. I think the one that that guides me most is, it's not about the money, but it is about the money. So it's not about the money because that's not what gets me up out of bed. I used to dread Sunday nights. I don't dread Sunday nights. I'm not thinking about a huge exit and buying a ski chalet like that. It doesn't actually interest me. Like, I want the business to be super successful and to give a great return to my investors, but that's not what guides me. So it's not about the money. But then for me, to run a successful business, it is really about the money. So making sure that we get to profitability as quickly as possible, to grow our sales, to raise money from the kind of investors that can align with Seep is like that is super important. So I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of like a bit of a
it makes perfect sense to me. And I do think it's interesting. There's been a huge shift, I think, in the last 5 years, particularly in the sort of startup scale up world, that people are at a race to get to profitability. And that was not the case a decade ago, right? I mean, when people were investing a decade ago, they were expecting you to lose money and just build these huge audiences and then monetize it later. And that environment has completely shifted. And it's really interesting seeing that play out, and also plays out differently for women than it does for men, by the way. So men are more likely to, have loss creating businesses for a longer period of time than women are. And so it's really interesting how that plays out in terms of investment and venture capital and everything else. So I think at the moment it's gone down. The number of women who've been invested in is now at 2%. It was I think at one point it was 3%. Now
it's gone down to 1.7%. And I think
1.7. Yeah.
And the UK is 28th in the world in terms of gender parity when it comes to investing, which is pretty
wow.
horrendous.
Yeah, that's horrendous. And then also, if you're a woman of color, it's even worse. So,
like significantly worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So this, what I love about what Trinny's doing and what Deborah's doing, I talk about them like I know them. I will one day hopefully know them. But, what I love about what they are doing is by investing in women, and same with Sarah Davies, by investing in women and by helping build these female-run businesses, you are just changing the game for the landscape in the future. And the more successful companies we can create with successful female founders who then have money to, by the way, invest in other women, because, like you said, it's not about the ski chalet, although that would be lovely. You can also take that money and reinvest it in women's business.
In these amazing women. I learned a stat last week that was that women are 2 times more likely to invest in other women, right? So we need more people sort of scaling fast and exiting to give back.
Yeah, and you're starting to see it happen, which I think is really good. And I think in 10, 20 years, the landscape's going to be totally different in terms of where women can get funding from, how much funding is available to them. At the moment, it's diabolical, but I think that's going to change as, we get these really intelligent, hardworking women building incredible businesses that change the world, like yours. So we have a gift for people who are listening to the podcast or watching it, and that is that you can go to theseepcompany.com. So SEEP, so theseepcompany.com, and you can use the code TechPixies20, so TECHPIXIES 20, and then you can get 20% off until the end of April. So we are really excited to have that code, and we will be sharing that with our community for sure, because we want them to benefit from this incredible product that you've created. What do you think is the product people should get their hands on first when they go to the website?
So definitely this product. So this is a sponge scourer. So, those horrible green and yellow like washing up sponges that sit on sinks and behind toilets.
Yeah, everyone's thinking I've got one of those right now in my kitchen sink.
They tend to all go, oh, when they remember it. And so this is our equivalent. And so this is our bestseller. We've sold over 1 million of them. Yeah. And if you don't want to shop shop directly with us, then we're also available on Ocado, Tesco, and on Amazon. So yeah, lots of ways to buy.
Awesome. Well, we do hope they shop directly with you with the code that we've given them.
Even better. Yeah, even better to buy it from us directly.
I love that. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And where obviously people can find you at theseepcompany.com. And if they want to find you on social media, what is your handle?
It's at the Seep Company. So on Instagram, Facebook, and a little bit TikTok. We're not as active as we'd like to be, but we're getting there.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on the show. What a great story to share. And I'm so glad that you are healthy, alive, and well, and you can build this amazing eco-friendly empire.
Thank you so much for having me on, Joy. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right. Wow. That was really exciting. I got a WhatsApp message that came through from Laura, and she was saying, could I come on the show? And I was like, yes, please. I absolutely want you to come on the show. She's got such a great story. And I think that this will hopefully inspire you to see what's possible, no matter what challenges you face. Here she had a really serious diagnosis of breast cancer, and she was able to not only get through it, but come out the other side stronger and create a business that's changing the world. So I feel really lucky that she wanted to come on the podcast, and I'm really grateful that she reached out. So if you know someone who has a great story to tell, please do reach out to us, support@techpixies.com. We want to tell their story. And I want to thank you for listening to the podcast for another week. And please make sure that you've subscribed to it or followed it on wherever you listen to podcasts. Drop in a review if you would like as well. I would love that. We love the reviews, and we do read through them as a team and really appreciate the feedback. And thanks so much for listening. Catch you next week on the next round of the next podcast of Career Interrupted. Bye for now.